Wow. First and foremost, I want to say I'm very impressed with the debates, the topics, uh, and the type of arguments that are brought up. I was most impressed with the personal examples people would give, particularly in Africa. The example that I like the most is the train from Ibadan to Lagos and the terminals. All of us know the challenges of traveling at an African airport or African train station and the hassle that we get. So that was interesting to see that real life example. And for me, I want to say that if you guys are the type of people that are going to be leading Africa in the future, then we don't have any problems. So I want to give yourself a round of applause. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm just going to speak but from what I saw and then give some background about my points of view and just some analysis on this topic. Team one and team two did a great job, but this topic is not a black and white topic. That's why it's difficult to say it's bad or good. And one of the speakers mentioned that you cannot say that this thing is about it's good or bad. You can have a bipolar mentality. It's quite difficult, especially in the context of something like Africa. We start by defining what is Africa. Africa is the most diverse continent in the world. The only thing we all have in common is our dark skin, but we're a country of multiple religions, cultures, languages, unique history, unique culture, identities. Within our own African countries, we have hundreds of tribes. In South Sudan alone, we have 64 tribes. There's 64 different languages. Now imagine if you include all of Africa. I think if you add up all these African languages, that's more than the languages in the European Union or in some of these Asian countries. So Africa is not a monolith. And that's one thing we always have to mention. But the same way Africa has similar problems, it has diverse problems at the same time. It has its similarities and its differences. We look at the differences of colonial history. What is colonialism? Colonialism was the European exploitation of Africa. And this started at the Berlin Conference of 1884, where the plan was this resource-rich area needs to be split up amongst Europeans, and Europeans would administer the area and exploit it. So we define colonialism as what? A relationship that is not mutually beneficial, where one party to the agreement is benefiting at the expense of another. Where we define a positive relationship as one where both parties are benefiting. And that's what arguments that were made by Team 2, where you have instances where, yes, they may charge us higher interest rates, but we get a train station, we get an airport, we get a road. Those are things that is better than what the Europeans did, where the Europeans enslaved us, the Europeans took our land, the Europeans murdered our fathers and our mothers. That's one argument. Another thing is we need to start mentioning how diverse Africa is. Africa, in Africa, if you get Africans in the room, you'll have English, French, Swahili, Spanish, Portuguese, and African religions. Like I'm sure in that room, there's more than 50 languages that are spoken in that room, or within the African Society of Cambridge alone, considering somebody's a mother tongue, their tribal language, their language spoken in their country, such as South Sudan, we speak English. But then in our northern neighbor, Sudan, they speak Arabic. Such as myself alone, I speak my traditional languages, Dinka, I speak Arabic, and I speak English. So you see how diverse we are. Also, on top of that, we have a unique history. The example you give is you cannot talk about things that happen in Tanzania. It might not be applicable in Nigeria, such as you may talk about civilian and military rule in Nigeria from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. But in Tanzania, you had a one-party rule till now. The Chama Mapinduzi have been ruling the country since independence, since the time of Julius Nyerere. You cannot, independence, South Sudan got its independence in 2011, Ghana in 1957, Namibia in 1990. This is very unique that we have to mention that Africa is diverse. We are a very diverse group of people. The unique colonial history. You have countries in Africa that were passed on to different colonial quote unquote masters, such as the German colonies, Tanganyika, which was a German colony, but was in 1918 during the Treaty of Versailles. It was handed over to the British. You have Cameroon. Cameroon now is seen as a quote unquote French colony, but Cameroon was actually a German colony. And then you have Namibia. Namibia was a German colony, and it just got its independence in 1990. So those are things we want to mention, and I want to make it clear that we are very diverse. But the same way as that our colonial history is what makes us similar. Our ancestors, what make us similar. The way our cultures are very, very close. Now we define what is a problem. A problem is an issue that's an impediment to something else. What we want in Africa, we want development. We want to improve the economic situation. We want to improve healthcare. We want to improve security. So the problems can be broken down into political, economic, security. So political problems could be, as for example, we talk now, the African Union Summit is going on and they're discussing the issues of coups. Coups is also a political and a security issue where military coups that happen, it creates political instability. There are some countries in Africa who have elections regularly without any problems. Then there's other countries where when you talk about their elections, your heart starts beating. And there's some countries that do have elections, but people question the elections. Many people question Museveni and the NRM and how they keep winning elections, but to them, they keep winning. So now to the point of colonialism, we have to look at this from a different approach. Now I'm going to start with analyzing the pro. Okay, is colonialism to blame for Africa? The argument is yes. You say yes. All of Africa problems, our political, economic, or social, and security are as a result of our colonial history, meaning that the Europeans came, they drew borders that didn't make sense, and we're stuck with each other and we're fighting each other. That's one argument people make, that civil wars in Africa are because they got us to fight amongst each other as tribesmen. But then the counter argument is, why do we allow it to happen? Why do we accept it? And if we do want issues of to secede, for instance, should we have a referendum? And this is the debate that you see happening in Somaliland, the debate happening in Biafra in Nigeria. There's questions that should we succeed or should we be forced to stay together? South Sudan fought a liberation struggle from 1983 to 2005. In 2005, it signed a peace agreement. Then that peace agreement had a referendum that allowed it to vote for succession, and we voted to secede by 98%. And now we have a country called South Sudan. But when we did get our secession, we had our own internal problems. 2 years later, we got into conflict amongst ourselves. So people argue, okay, if the issue was secession, when we secede, we're going to be better off. When we did secede, we started having the same challenges as most countries too. Now, the biggest challenge with China, and this is China as a hot button, is that the Chinese come and they're knocking on the door. They approach an African leader and they say, hey, we're going to build you a highway. We're going to build you a railroad. We're going to build you infrastructure that you haven't seen before. And we do this, what we need, we just need a guarantee. Your guarantee could be your oil, your minerals, your land, and we'll build this for you. Now, if you're an African president and you want to deliver, and you, in some instances, you can A, be a dictator and not worry about elections, or B, worry about elections, you want to deliver services. You want to be able to build infrastructure, do roads, bring in investment. Now, if you see that a Chinese is coming and willing to work with you, the terms might be a little bit tough, but willing to work with you, would you take that opportunity? And that's a question you have to ask yourself. Put yourself in their shoes. If you're the president of a country and China says, I'll build a highway connecting all your country and just give me the crude as a guarantee, you build a highway. You might have to pay them back in loans. The loans may be predatory, but the rhetoric that China is exploiting Africa is a rhetoric that it can be seen as a Western rhetoric, because when we say China is exploiting and China is bad, that means there's somebody who's good, and that person that's good is the West. But we also view the West as very paternalistic. America is coming saying that you need to do this. You need to have democracy. You need to have a balanced budget. You need to promote these certain values at the expense of other values. That's in itself is seen as colonialism. So what is tempting a lot of African countries is that, let me go work with China. Now, as Team 2 mentioned, corrupt African leaders can be to blame, because if you are a president of a country and you see that the interest rate on this loan is 20%, you should say, no, this is unacceptable. I'm not going to sign this because this is exploitative. But if the interest rate is 20%, and in that 20%, you're giving something small, 10%, as they call it, the 10% commission, you may be tempted to look the other way and say, you know what? They're going to build the road. I'm going to get something small on the side. Why not? And this is not my problem. I'm going to be gone in 5 to 10 years. It's the next president's problem. Okay, let's go further. What role does the citizenry have to play in all this? What role do the citizens have to play? Should the citizens demand more transparency? Should they demand more accountability? Should they say every contract that is being signed by international companies should be made public and should be scrutinized by the parliament or should be scrutinized by the public? Should we as a citizenry ask for more? Because if African leaders have been doing this and we say it's a problem is leadership, then how come leadership has changed since Africa got its independence, but yet we still have the same problems? And Africa now is the next frontier in globalization. So what we're getting into is Africa, and many can say is that it's a second Cold War. You can say that Africa is a non-aligned area. And China has seen that, especially during the Cold Wars, instances where there was issues between the Soviets and the Americans resulted in civil war. The prime example is the Angola Civil War. In Angola, you had the MPLA, which was backed by the Cubans and the Russians, the Soviets at the time. Then you had UNITA, which was backed by the Western countries. They didn't care about the development of Angola. They just wanted to assert their influence there. So we have to ask ourselves, when we analyze these relationships, are these exploitative, meaning that are they taking more from us? And is it affecting us negatively or positively? And I think that's the genesis. In some of my presentations, I did a presentation in 2019 in Washington, D.C., and I spoke about the issue of China. And when I mentioned some of the things that China is doing, I said, China is winning the hearts of these African countries. And when these African countries default on loans, such as you see the issue of in Zambia, where you at one point the Chinese wanted to take the Lusaka power plant, they wanted to take the Lusaka airport. It's a guarantee. China is engaging in exploitative behaviors, but this is not like colonialism of the Europeans where they come and force you. A president or a minister signed with his pen a contract that put his country in this situation. But why is China getting away with it? Because people feel like they don't have an option. When Chinese are constantly courting Africans, you see the scholarships, such as my brother mentioned, the training of Nigerians going to China to being trained. In South Sudan, so many engineers in the petroleum sector and in the mining sector have been trained by China, free of charge. You can say this is a scholarship, Chinese scholarship. Many students that go there come back speaking Chinese. You have the technology and the information transfer with these people coming back. Chinese are always doing conferences. Every year there's a China summit, and this summit is led by high-level people within the Chinese government. It's either the president himself or the Minister of Foreign Affairs. When is the last time has the West done an African conference? And they only do these conferences as a reaction to China. So for us as Africans, we have to start asking ourselves, are we going to be able to accept to fall into a narrative where one country is bad and one country is good? Or are we going to start asking ourselves, what is something that is mutually beneficial for us? And what is mutually beneficial for us is to find developmental partners who share our values of development and improving the lives of the African people. We want to lift Africans out of poverty. We want to improve education. We want to improve healthcare. Like many of us, including myself, I studied in the United States. You guys are United Kingdom. We dream of a day where instead of leaving Africa, we can go to Lagos for the best education. Go to Nairobi. Go to Dar es Salaam. Come to Juba. Go to Addis Ababa. That's part of development. So we want developmental initiatives. And on top of that, we want results. We don't want African contractors who are going to be given contracts, take the money and leave. We want results. So African leaders have a right to deal with, to interact with who they want to interact with. And then I mentioned in my presentation is that at the presentation, I was talking to mostly Americans who felt worried about the role of China and their hegemony in Africa, and how African resources are being exploited by China and America sitting around. And I said, well, of course, China is willing to take a risk and enter countries. Like right now, the South Sudan oil sector is dominated by Chinese. CNPC is here in South Sudan. They have a lot of subsidiaries. They have a very nice office. Americans won't come to South Sudan because they'll say this place is dangerous. It's a place of war. People are killing each other. And you know the typical rhetoric you hear about Africa. If you go there, check in with the embassy. But Chinese come here and do business with us. Americans don't. The Chinese go to African countries and build infrastructure. But when an African leader goes to America and says that I want to do development, I want loans, I want access to funding, the first thing that they get is you need to reform your cabinet. You need to fire this minister; he's corrupt. You need to reform your human rights regime, and a list of demands. Well, why would I go there when the person on the other side of the world doesn't ask me about my internal affairs? And that's what many African leaders say. China does not intervene in our internal affairs. They respect our sovereignty. And in the article that Dean mentioned in the national interest, I mentioned that what China is doing now is putting itself in a situation where we're indebted to them. This is where we go to the point of debt trap diplomacy, where you make somebody feel so good, you make them feel like you're the only person that they have. And then later, when they want something, they can use that leverage against you. The Chinese now can come and say, we want land, give it to us for free. Well, why? We'll build you that railroad. And when you defaulted on your loans, we didn't ask you any questions. So it's a question that one of the debaters mentioned. If somebody's giving you some things and it seems too good to be true, you have to ask yourself, what do they want? Do they want something in the future? If I come to you and say, here's $1,000 or 1,000 pounds, don't worry about it. You would ask yourself, what do they want? Are they being friendly, or is there something that they want down the line? And later when I see you and I say, hey, I want you to do this for me. And you say, I can't, but I gave you that $1,000 last time. That's seen as exploitative. So the challenge of debt trap diplomacy is that many of the times people in African countries see in the beginning stages that they see the development happening, they see these initiatives. But we look at the long term. In the long term, in 10 to 20, 30 years, how much debt are we going to have? How much commitments do we have? How much land has been sold off? And so I think I'll end my speaking there to open for questions, but that's just the gist. In conclusion, Africans have a right to work with who they want to work with. As long as the relationship is mutually beneficial, it improves African development. But Africans should not be told who they can't work with. Africa has sovereign nations who have a right to decide what's best for them. And the people have a role to play in what's happening in these affairs. They have a right to ask questions about these relationships between the other country. Thank you guys very much.
There was a comment. Thank you, Akol.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Akol. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, I hear you clearly.
Awesome. There was a comment in the chat box. We just want to bring in the people on Zoom. I know they've been with us in this journey. So let me just read out a comment that was put earlier. Sorry?
Those on Zoom, if you'd want to ask a question or participate, just show your hand emoji and then we'll call you and you unmute yourself to talk. Is that okay? So we are starting with those on Zoom because they've been with us and haven't participated. And so if you'd want to make any contribution or ask a question, please let's see.
Sorry. Oh, can you start out?
I can't see all participants. Okay. Okay, do you have any questions from those on Zoom?
There's a comment.
Okay, a comment, yes, read it.
Oh, yes.
Abani Holy says, personally, I don't think neocolonialism is to blame for various problems we have in Africa. This is because I believe strongly that it is our own attitude and that of some of our leaders. Because of their selfish interests, they are unable to solve even the little problems that their country faces. Even if we have everything in abundance, we will still have problems until we change our attitudes. A vivid example I always give is Dubai. They had nothing, but because of their hardworking leader, a leader who cares about his people, but not himself only, they have a lot now. Thank you. So that's Aboni's thoughts. Michael chips in and says, well, I think Africa is suffering from neocolonialism for the same reasons suffered from colonialism. For neocolonialism, I know there has to be a collaboration of African leaders with foreign leaders to ensure that the interests of both are met with little concern for the development, sustainability, and poverty reduction and welfare in African countries. But in some African countries, it is otherwise. The leaders practice kleptocracy. So, and yeah, that's it.
Okay, so we can take questions on the audience. Okay.
Questions from the audience to the speaker. Anyway, a contribution to the place open.
First, right? I think when we say the people have a role to play as regards Africa, I always like to say we should contextualize our point and remember that we're talking about Africa. And I'll give you an example because I like examples. People are protesting in Mali as we speak. Is anyone listening to them? That's not a simple question. When you say that people have a role to play, people are protesting in Mali. Is anyone listening to them? People protested in Nigeria in 2020. The legacy is one of blood and dead bodies and a grand cover-up under sunlight, right? He was saying that if you protest in Kenya, you'll be shocked. And we had a friend here 2 years ago. Yes. He is stateless because he spoke against the leadership in Rwanda. His citizenship was revoked. Yeah. So it's that bad. So when we talk about the people have a role to play in Africa, let's be serious. It's an illusion. It's an illusion. It's an illusion. It can't work. That's one. Two, colonialism, when we say, and I've read a paper from a professor here in Cambridge, who wrote that colonialism happened for a relatively short period in history, because they tried to make it seem that colonialism started in 1884, 1885 at Berlin. No. First contact with Africa was with Portugal, right? And that was in, I said first contact with Africa was with Portugal, Cape Verde. So guess when that happened? 1470s. That was the 15th century. Now start counting. Down to 1885. What actually happened at Berlin was an attempt by European leaders to legalize, because in August 1885, they wrote something called the Final Act of the Berlin Conference, which was pretty much a law that attempted to retrospectively legalize all colonial acts that happened before that and to provide a framework for subsequent colonial acts. So colonialism is it has a very long history. When we talk about path dependence, when we talk about entrenched systems, when we talk about systems that we really can't change, a system of leadership, a system of government, everything about it has very long, deep-rooted history. Right. So for me, again, summary, right? We shouldn't underestimate entrenched systems, locked-in systems. We shouldn't underestimate those. We shouldn't deceive ourselves that as people we have the rules because we don't, right? There are one-party systems in Cameroon, for example, that have elections every 4 years, but the same person keeps coming back to power. But there are elections, and the people have the power to change the system. We don't. Let's just face the fact, right? Because at the end of the day, those who understand the system and who have gamed the system and have captured the system because they are perpetuating that existing colonial system, will continue to dominate. Now, coming to China specifically, and saying that China provides benefits and endears African leaders because they come into our countries and they give us what we need. I would say we should all go back and read China's 100 years development strategy. Have we read China's 100 years development strategy? Yes. You read that? Now, if you read China's 100 years, they just finished the first 50 years last year. They are in the next 50 years. And they are writing the one for the next 100 years. Guess what? Everything they are doing in Africa is a strategy. It's geopolitics. It is their strategy to give money, because when you go to the UN, this is how politics works at the UN. It's numbers. How many people do you control? Right? That's how you get what you want done. China increased capital. China forced an increase in capital at the IMF at the World Bank and increased their shareholding to the second largest shareholding at the IMF and the World Bank. Why did they do that? Because economically, they control a large section of the world. They were only able to do that because they made free money available to everybody. So they should naturally have one of the highest shares at the global institutions that provide either concessional or market finance to countries. So let's not look at China and think that China is doing the level that China is helping us. It is strategy. It's in the document. They wrote it down and they're executing it, and they'll continue executing it until they are done. Thank you very much.
I don't think on a human issue, I think it's not enough for us to overstate the record. I don't think on the human development issue, can you hear me now? I also think on the human development issue, we should, on the social issue, I think it's not enough to overstate the claim that, yes, the relationship with China and like Africa is a very dynamic one that cannot be dependent on whether it's neocolonialism or colonialism, right? But I also think we should talk about the students that go into Chinese universities and what they actually face in China. So when Alice talked about how China wants you to go back to Nigeria and help you develop your country, in most cases, Chinese students that go to Tsinghua or they go to Yanqing Academy or whichever one, they do suffer from like a grievous anti-Black racism that China is not enough for them to even live in those countries, right? We'll also talk about the fact that the huge anti-Blackness that goes on within the Chinese state against Black people that is also not talked about even in Africa and also in China. So I don't think we should just think about, oh, there are no secondary harms that comes from schooling abroad, or there are no secondary harms that come from schooling in a different country. I think where we get an aspect of agency comes from the individuated instances of each individual Africans that do go to China to school, or individual Africans that exist within the African context. That is where agency occurs within the micro systems or the micro politics, not on the micro system. I refuse this idea that Africans have like agency to structure the macro system or the micro political systems that exist within African states. No, we don't. African political system or African state is a project. It's a company, not a nation state. And that is a recipe of colonialism.
Doug, do you have any contributions to make, or would you want to sort of answer some of the discussions that have gone on so far?
I think, yeah, I was gonna add something. I like what the last speaker has just mentioned, and the one before, and they talk about geopolitics. So there's 2 points. Number one is the geopolitics point, is that we are an arena where, as I mentioned when I spoke, is Africa's now the center of globalization, where the resources is location, the agriculture, and this thing. It's a place where you is the key, is going to be the next fight. And what China is doing now is China is doing a long-term strategy of geopolitics. That's what many people argue. And that's where eyes have turned in the West, in Europe, and in America, where China is not benefiting Africans, China is taking advantage. But this is all proxy war of geopolitics, such as when African countries got caught between the Soviet Union and the United States. So we should be careful and know that we ourselves should try to become political players. Like the speaker mentioned at the United Nations, we have 55 votes. How do we use those votes? What initiatives are we championing? Or are we just following these initiatives? We have an African Union. We have ECOWAS. We have East Africa Community. We have SADC. We have a list of multilateral institutions. But the question is, what are they doing? And many people argue that ECOWAS is a toothless institution, or these regional bodies are toothless because of the lack of the lack of their ability to play a role within the geopolitics sphere. And then the speaker mentioned that Africa is a project. And many people see Africa as a project. They don't see us as countries. Like, this is a place for resources, and this place has been exploited since the 1400s. As one of the speakers mentioned, it's a place that is ripe with resources, has prime line, has oil, minerals, agriculture. This is a place that is going to play a critical role. So we have to think about, as Africans, is we also want to play a role in the geopolitics. We can no longer be a project or be somebody's pet. We want to play a role. So those are two things I just want to add.
Thank you, Akol. Thank you very much for your time, Akol. There's just 2 more questions in the chat and then we can close. Maybe you can address those as you close. We have 2 minutes till the end. So let me read out the question from the chat box. It's from Femi. And it says, so Femi is asking, could it be mutually beneficial to have a relationship with a powerhouse that in the next 20 to 40 years amongst the global landscape could be really strong? And secondly, is it possible China's influence all across Africa could help Africa be more unified politically and economically? I ask this because from China's perspective, it is now in their interest that Africa becomes much more prosperous so they can continue to benefit too in the long term, especially as China's growth has been slowing down a lot since their massive growth. So maybe you can give us your comments in 2 minutes, Akol.
Yeah. Okay, so question 1, it can be mutually beneficial, considering that China is playing a critical role in the global hegemony. And for it to be mutual benefit, is Africa has to continue to develop. And when it comes to the issue of exploitation, the predatory lending, this is a conversation that should be held at high levels, at regional bodies and at the African Union, a conversation where every country should agree to review some of its contracts and agreement with China and seek to address some of these predatory tactics, such as the taking of resources, the taking of land, airports, power plants. That's something that needs to be addressed. But it could be beneficial if Africa know what they want, the countries know what they want, and they're going to get development. It could be beneficial to partner with somebody, have a good relationship with somebody who is a global player. And for question 2, I think China could play a role in helping Africa unify. And I say this because the problems that we have with China is the belief that the relationship is exploitative. But for the most part, many people argue, many advocates of China-Africa relationships, Chinese, or even some Africans say, at least we're getting infrastructure, at least we're getting some roads, at least they finished the job, as opposed to giving it to local contractors who do half the work and take half the money. But I also think a relationship with China like this has to be done at a high level. And that's the point I want to add on is, if African countries believe that there's a common problem in the way they deal with China, this has to be tabled at the African Union. It has to be discussed at ECOWAS, at SADC, at the East African Community, saying, how do we deal with China? And how can we support countries who are defaulting on loans? That could be a conversation, because The issue of debt trap becomes when a country defaults on its loans. Is there a way that African countries could use this leverage in its relationships to help countries be giving breaks on some of these loans, be given extra grace period? So that's the thing. Then finally, just in closing, I'll mention that for us as Africans, we have a great potential, especially as in this century, to make a lasting impact for the next generation and put Africa in a position where it's no longer the Africa of poverty, of destruction, of civil war, where it can be an Africa of prosperity, an Africa of change, an Africa of hope. So that's the role we play. And leaving today, I want everybody to think about what can you do as an individual to make Africa better? You studying right now, you're making Africa better, but what can you do as an individual to make that small difference? Because if we all make 1% difference, that 1% will go a long way. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Akol. Thank you, everyone on Zoom. I know some of you are like 3 hours, 2 hours ahead, and you stayed up to watch this. Thank you very much. We'll have more interesting discussions coming up as part of Africa Over Coffee in March. Some from the US as well. Oh, shout out to the people from the US as well. Thank you for joining. You guys are 7 hours behind. So thanks for coming. Thanks, Akol, for making your time. I know when I called you, you were enjoying your honeymoon. Thank you for picking up the call of a Cambridge student. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And taking your time to do this. For everyone, keep following our channels. We have a lot of stuff we do as the African Society of Cambridge University, as well as other African societies in the university and surrounding schools in this country and other schools. But Africa Society of Cambridge University is very vibrant and one of the good ones, the better ones. I'm joking, everyone is quite nice. So in conclusion, I'll invite the president of the African Society to give her closing remarks, and then we can finish.
Hello, everyone. Once again, we've had a fantastic debate tonight, and it's always exciting to see people come out to debate about Africa and the progress that we wish to see. And so as we go back to our homes in reflection of the discussions that have gone on today, we know China is not really our friend, neither are we friends to Africa, to China as well. And so let's reimagine our relationships, sort of reconceptualize what neocolonialism is looking like in Africa. And for me, the future, that is the problem. What are these debts going to do to the next generation, to our children, the children that our children give birth to? And so it's very much, what is the future of Africa? For me, that is the question. And so we hope to have more of such discussions in prepping our own contribution back home when we go to Africa. And so thank you once again, Doc, for making time for us. And thank you all those who joined us from Africa and from across the world. Have a good day, a good night, wherever you find yourself across the world. Thank you. Bye.
Night.
Thank you, everyone.